Steve Harvey was standing at the Family Feud podium when a young man walked onto the stage, and something about him made Steve pause mid-sentence. The 22-year-old looked healthy and confident, but when his mother stepped forward holding a photograph, Steve's expression changed completely. The photo showed the same young man, but he was unrecognizable, over 400 pounds heavier, barely able to stand. What Steve didn't know yet was that this transformation had taken 3 years of struggle, pain, and a promise made at a funeral that would change everything. By the end of this Family Feud episode, Steve would be crying, the entire studio would be on their feet, and millions of viewers would witness one of the most inspiring stories of human willpower ever told on television. It was Thursday afternoon, September 14th, 2023, during a Family Feud taping at the Atlanta studios. The Richardson family from Indianapolis, Indiana, was competing against the Torres family from Miami, Florida. Both families brought incredible energy, but from the moment the Richardson family walked onto the stage, something felt different. The family was led by 22-year-old Daniel Richardson, who moved with confidence and energy that immediately caught Steve's attention. Daniel was fit, wearing a well-tailored blue suit that showed off his athletic build. He stood at the podium with his mother, Linda, his father, Robert, his younger sister, Emma, and his grandmother, Patricia. They looked like any other competitive family ready to win some money on Family Feud, but Linda Richardson was clutching something in her hand, a large photograph that she kept glancing at with tears in her eyes, and grandmother Patricia kept looking at Daniel with an expression that mixed pride with something that looked like amazement, as if she still couldn't believe what she was seeing. During the family introduction, Steve walked over to the Richardson family with his usual charisma. "Now, we've got the Richardson family from Indianapolis. Tell me about yourselves." Daniel stepped forward to speak for the family, and his voice was strong and clear. "Well, Mr. Harvey, we're here to play hard and hopefully win some money. But more than that, we're here to celebrate something pretty incredible." Steve's eyebrows raised. "Oh? What are we celebrating?" That's when Linda Richardson stepped forward, and with shaking hands, she held up the photograph she'd been clutching. Steve looked at it, and his smile slowly faded. The photo showed a young man who weighed easily over 500 pounds, sitting in a reinforced wheelchair, his face barely visible beneath the layers of weight, his body so large that he seemed to be drowning in his own flesh. "Mr. Harvey," Linda said, her voice breaking, "this is my son. This is Daniel." 3 years ago, Steve looked from the photograph to Daniel standing confidently beside his mother, and his mouth literally fell open. Wait, this is you?" Daniel nodded, and now there were tears in his eyes too. "Yes, sir. 3 years ago, I weighed 587 pounds. I couldn't walk more than 10 feet without needing to sit down. I couldn't fit in a regular car. I couldn't hug my own mother without her having to reach around me. I was dying, Mr. Harvey, and I knew it." The studio fell completely silent. The competing Torres family, who had been laughing and joking moments before, were now staring at Daniel in shock. The audience was riveted. Steve set down his note cards and walked closer to Daniel. "Young man, how much do you weigh now?" 185 pounds, Rick. Sir." The audience gasped. Steve's eyes widened. "You lost over 400 pounds? 402 pounds, Daniel said quietly. "But I didn't just lose weight. I found my life." What nobody in the studio knew yet was the story behind that transformation. A story of addiction, desperation, loss, and a deathbed promise that gave Daniel the strength to do what doctors said was nearly impossible. Daniel Richardson had been overweight his entire life. By age 10, he weighed 200 pounds. By 15, he was over 350 pounds. By his 19th birthday, he had crossed 500 pounds and was still gaining. Food had become Daniel's addiction, his comfort, and his prison. "I ate to numb everything," Daniel would later explain. "I was bullied constantly as a kid. I had no friends. I hated myself. And every time I felt bad, I ate. And then I felt worse about eating. So I ate more. It was a cycle I couldn't break." By age 19, Daniel could barely function. He had dropped out of college after one semester because he couldn't fit in the classroom desks. He couldn't work because standing for more than a few minutes left him breathless and in pain. He lived in his parents' basement, leaving his room only for meals, spending his days playing video games and eating. He needed a reinforced wheelchair to move around the house. He hadn't seen his own feet in years. The doctors were blunt. At his current trajectory, Daniel would be dead before he turned 25. His heart was straining under the weight. He had developed type 2 diabetes. His blood pressure was dangerously high. His joints were deteriorating. He was suffocating under his own body. But Daniel couldn't stop eating. Food was the only thing that made him feel better, even as it was killing him. His parents were desperate, his sister was terrified, and Daniel had accepted that he was going to die young. He had given up. Then, on March the 3rd, 2020, Daniel's grandfather Thomas died of a heart attack at age 68. Thomas Richardson had been Daniel's best friend, the only person who never judged him, never lectured him, never looked at him with disappointment. When Daniel was too big to leave the house, Grandpa Thomas would come to him, sitting in the basement for hours, talking about everything and nothing, making Daniel laugh when he thought he'd forgotten how. The day before Thomas died, he'd visited Daniel in the basement one last time. Daniel remembers the conversation with perfect clarity. "Danny," his grandfather had said, using the childhood nickname no one else was allowed to use, "I need to ask you something." "What is it, Grandpa?" Thomas had looked at his grandson with tears in his eyes. "I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll try. Promise me you'll fight for your life. You're only 19 years old. You have so much life ahead of you. Please, Danny. Promise me you'll try to get healthy." Daniel had cried and nodded and promised, the way you promise things to people you love, even when you don't believe you can keep the promise. The next day, Thomas was gone. At the funeral, Daniel couldn't even fit in the pews at the church. He had to stand in the back, alone, watching his family grieve. And in that moment, looking at his grandfather's casket, Daniel made a decision. He would keep his promise, or he would die trying. The next morning, Daniel weighed himself for the first time in years. 587 pounds. He took a photograph of himself in the mirror, the photograph his mother would later bring to Family Feud. Then he called a weight loss specialist and said the words that would change his life. "I need help, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes." What followed were 3 years of the hardest work Daniel had ever done. He started with a medically supervised diet of 1,500 calories per day. For someone eating 8,000, 5,000 calories daily, this was agony. The first month, he cried himself to sleep every night, but he didn't quit. He started physical therapy. 10 minutes of exercise left him exhausted, but he thought of his grandfather and pushed through. When he lost 100 pounds, he started walking outside. First to the mailbox, then around the block, then miles. When he lost 200 pounds, he joined a gym despite the stairs. The weight came off slowly. Some weeks he lost 5 pounds. Some weeks he gained 2 back. There were days he wanted to quit, days he stood crying in front of the refrigerator at 2 a.m. But he always came back because he'd made a promise. After 1 year, 267 pounds lost. After 2 years, 351 pounds lost. After 3 years, 402 pounds lost. Daniel weighed 185 pounds. He could do 50 push-ups. He had completed a 10K race. He had a life. Now, standing on the Family Feud stage, Daniel was about to share this story with the millions of people. Steve Harvey looked at the photograph, then at Daniel, then back at the photograph. "Young man," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "what you did, that's not just impressive, that's miraculous." "It wasn't a miracle," Daniel said quietly. "It was a promise, and a lot of pain, and deciding every single day that I wanted to live more than I wanted to quit." The game proceeded, but Steve kept looking at Daniel, kept asking questions, kept trying to understand how someone accomplishes what seemed impossible. The Richardson family was doing well in the game, their competitive spirit clearly intact despite the emotional revelation. Then came fast money. Daniel and his mother Linda were selected to play together. Linda answered the first 4 questions while Daniel waited offstage with the noise-canceling headphones. Then Daniel returned for his turn. Steve asked the first 4 questions, which Daniel answered quickly. Then came the 5th question, the one that would make everyone in the studio cry. "Name something," Steve read from his card, "that you wish you could tell someone who's no longer with us." Daniel's eyes immediately filled with tears. He didn't hesitate. "I kept my promise, Grandpa. I kept my promise." The audience gasped. Steve put his hand over his heart. Linda Richardson started crying so hard she had to sit down. Daniel's grandmother, Patricia, was sobbing. The competing Torres family was crying. Even the camera operators had tears streaming down their faces. Steve set down his cards and walked over to Daniel. He put his hands on Daniel's shoulders and looked him in the eyes. "Your grandfather knows," Steve said, his own voice breaking. "Wherever he is right now, he knows you kept your promise, and he's so proud of you." Daniel nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down his face. "But let me tell you something else," Steve continued. "You didn't just keep a promise to your grandfather. You gave a gift to everyone who loves you. Your parents get to keep their son. Your sister gets to keep her brother. Your grandmother gets to keep her grandson. You gave them more years with you. That's the greatest gift anyone can give." Steve pulled Daniel into a hug, and the studio erupted in applause that lasted for over 3 minutes. Production stopped. Nobody cared about the game or the points or the money. They were witnessing something more valuable than any prize. When the applause finally died down, Steve made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Daniel Richardson, what you've accomplished is an inspiration. My foundation is going to cover any remaining medical expenses from your weight loss journey. And we're going to help you share your story with other young people who are struggling the way you struggled. Because if your story can save even one life, if it can give even one person hope, then it's a story that needs to be told." The episode featuring Daniel Richardson became one of the most watched Family Feud episodes ever, with over 500 million views online. But more importantly, Daniel's story sparked a movement. In the weeks after the episode aired, thousands of people reached out to Daniel, sharing their own struggles with weight, asking for advice, asking for hope. Daniel started a YouTube channel documenting his continued fitness journey and sharing tips for others trying to lose weight. Within 6 months, he had over 2 million subscribers. Daniel wrote a book called The Promise: How I Lost 400 Pounds and Found My Life. It became a bestseller and has been translated into 15 languages. In it, he's brutally honest about the struggle, about the pain, about the failures and the victories. "Losing weight saved my life," Daniel writes, "but it was never really about the weight. It was about deciding I deserved to live. It was about honoring someone who believed in me. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be before food became my prison." Today, Daniel Richardson is a certified personal trainer and nutritionist. He works specifically with people who have over 100 pounds to lose, people who are where he once was, hopeless, desperate, trapped in bodies that are slowly killing them. He understands their pain because he lived it, and he gives them what his grandfather gave him: belief that change is possible. "I tell my clients the same thing my grandfather told me," Daniel says. "Just try. Just fight for your life. It won't be easy. Some days it will be the hardest thing you've ever done, but you're worth fighting for." Daniel keeps the photograph, the one his mother brought to Family Feud, framed in his office. Next to it is a photo of his grandfather Thomas, and between them is a note that Daniel wrote the day after the funeral, the day he decided to change his life. "I promise, Grandpa, I promise." He kept that promise, and in doing so, he proved that transformation is possible, that addiction can be overcome, that the human will to survive and thrive is stronger than any obstacle when we have someone who believes in us and a reason to keep fighting. If this incredible story of transformation and determination moved your heart, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that change is possible, that they're worth fighting for, and that keeping promises to the people we love can give us strength we didn't know we had. Have you ever made a life-changing transformation? Let us know in the comments.